G'day everyone, and welcome to this short video unpacking Unit 1, Topic 1, the economic problem. Probably this relates to what you'll see as FA1 of Year 11 Year Economics coming up at the end of this term. Okay, it's important in senior school to really get your head around the cognitive verbs and the levels of understanding. In economics, we're going to ask you to describe, construct, explain, analyse and evaluate in these early stages, and it pretty much runs the same way all the way through the course. Generally, when you look at like a combination response style exam, describe, construct and explain tend to sit within the multiple choice questions and the short response, generally speaking. Okay, so I can't talk for all teachers in all schools, but this is generally how we see stuff run. Explain through to analyse and evaluate sort of comes where you'll start to see, going ahead of myself there, sort of goes where you start to see your extended response using data, figuring stuff out in terms of the problem and writing those 400 to 500 word responses and longer. Okay, so really in the first topic here, I'm going to break down for you a bit of the syllabus stuff. This is describe and it will also link through to explain. Okay, but first step in this is to look at the basic economic problem of relative scarcity. Okay, and those three economic questions. We'll come back to that later on. The need for decision-making by individuals, businesses and governments at all different levels. These three here are what we call our stakeholders. It's important in economics to always think about how any economic outcome could affect these three key stakeholder groups. For example, you might have a situation where firms definitely benefit from the minimum wage not being increased, as an example. That would be a great thing for firms, not have to pay more wages. But how would that negatively impact households? How would that impact government policy? How would that impact government taxation? Always think about anything that happens, anything that runs through the economic systems, how will it affect those three stakeholders? Then there's basically in your syllabus, there's just some key sort of terminology. And we're going to look probably at this in a bit more detail through the next few slides. Okay, construct. The big graph in Unit 1, Topic 1 is the production possibility curve. And so the syllabus says to explain by illustrating diagrammatic forms the concepts of scarcity, choice, opportunity, cost. You can read the rest there. It's important to be able to think through about the differences, like for instance, if we moved from point 3 to point 4, we'd see a drop in consumer good production, but we'd gain some capital goods. So we'd have to sort of understand where the opportunity cost sat within there. Point number 1 represents underutilization of resources. Unemployment. Point 2, currently is unattainable, but what if we had an improvement in technology or an improvement in efficiency or production methods or more output for the same number of inputs? We'd see our production possibilities curve shift outwards. We'd call that economic growth. So really understanding these models, the opportunity cost, the trade-off, the choices available, how it represents scarcity at a given point in time. Also make sure that you're clear about the assumptions of models. And the idea, once again, is ceteris paribus, all else remaining equal. Okay, so we're just going to base our decision on the facts at hand, what we know, assume nothing else changes, and this is what we'd see as a likely outcome. So I'd be going back over any work that you've done with your teachers on production possibility curves and the analysis that sits within that. Okay, explain. Firstly, opportunity cost, once again, big idea. The factors of production and the links to types of income. Land, labour, capital, enterprise. And once again, the income's linked there. For example, we can think about that in terms of how that influences the production possibility curve. For instance, an increase in capital would lead to an outward shift of our PPC. Sorry about the rough drawing, but you know what I mean. Increase in land would lead to an outward shift of our PPC. Increase in labour, increase in education would lead to an outward shift of our PPC, production possibility curve. Some people might call it a frontier. The second part, which is a little bit different here, is the economic systems. So we go from command, mixed, and free market economies. It's important to be able to think about how each of these economic systems attempt to answer our three basic economic questions. How do they do it differently? How does it influence efficiency? Does it lead to equity? Okay, and so going back through some of that work there to understand how governments and societies over time have tried to answer these three basic economic questions, and they've come up with different models of how to achieve that. The three key models are command, a mixed economy, which once again is a bit of a continuum, all these are on a continuum, to a free market economy. Okay. Now, analyze and evaluate. Like I said, these videos aren't going to give you a whole breakdown of how to do an analysis and evaluation. The first step with analysis is to ensure that you understand that you are interpreting data to make meaning to answer a question. I think that's the simplest way to look at it. A question. So you've been posed a question and you get some information given to you usually, and you've got to interpret it. And you've got to figure, how does this all help me to understand the question? Evaluate. Weigh up. The pros and cons of what you've found in analysis. What you find in your analysis, to then come to a conclusion and justify it. Okay? So in your analysis, you're going to look at your trends, your compare and contrast, your differences, similarities, all those sorts of things. And you work with your teacher on all the different actual analysis techniques you can use. But you're interpreting data to make meaning to answer a question, okay? And once again, when you get to your evaluation, you've got to think about the positives and the negatives, the pros and the cons of what you find in analysis to come to a conclusion and to justify a conclusion, okay? Come to a final decision. So when we look at the topic 1 there, analyze and evaluate the production possibilities curve to show the effects of different economic events. Okay, so for instance, education, productivity of labour, asymmetric technology advances, the effect of war. How does that influence our production possibilities curve? The second area of evaluation is down the bottom here in the blue. The ways that different economics attempt to resolve the three economic questions using real-world examples. So for example, when we look at our command economies like North Korea and Cuba, what are the pros and cons of that system? How does the data available to you help you justify your argument? How does a country like Singapore, which has a very free market approach, sort of think about what we're going to do here, how we're going to solve these questions within a fairly totalitarian regime, sometimes actually, or versus Norway, which then turns around and has a much more socially inclusive system. Very much a lot of government intervention in markets there. Okay, so that's the end of this video for now. What we'll look at just quickly to finish off, once again, is look across your syllabus, ensure that you know the stuff you have to describe, construct, explain, what, how, why, and an example. Stuff you're going to know what to analyze and to evaluate. Hope this helps, and good luck with any upcoming assessments. Cheers, folks.